David, welcome back to Talk Python to me. Great to have you here.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, hello. Going to be super fun to talk about Flask and more broadly palettes, just all the different projects around Flask and tools and variations like Court and so on. And you gave a really nice talk at Embedded FlaskCon. Talk a bit about that in a second, about the state of palettes. And I thought, let's take that idea and share it with everyone. So looking forward to talking about that.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on.
I bet there has. So yeah, it's been, I can't remember exactly when you were on. I think it's about 100 episodes ago, which puts that like a couple of years. What have you been up to the last couple of years?
Just more Flask. It's all Flask all the time.
Seems like such a simple API, but you can work on it forever, right?
I've acquired a few more libraries, so like written more libraries and stuff as well, but still same job. Well, I guess I got a house. I got married.
Okay, congratulations 2 times.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So a little bit of life changes.
Yeah, a little bit. Life keeps marching on. It's amazing. Cool. Well, Flask is certainly one of the most popular web frameworks. I guess we could start with like giving people a sense of the popularity, but my thought is just like, wow, the pressure of working on something that affects so many folks. Like if you push out a change,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've had a weird thought before that like I try not to think about the numbers too often because it's like 100 million or more if you add up all the different libraries and stuff a month. And I've had a thought before, like if I push out something that doesn't work for enough people, like that probably has some like very minor but noticeable like effect on the tech like sector for that day or hour, which is scary.
Yeah. It's not quite an AWS US
No.
1 East downtime, but it's also not that,
Yeah. I think over the past, definitely since I've started, a lot more people have become aware of like better practices around like pinning their dependencies, that sort of thing. In part because we did make some, deprecations and then breaking changes in Flask and the other libraries, and people came to our issue tracker saying, "Oh, you broke something," and ultimately, I had to tell them like, you need to be using a tool. There's quite a few tools out now, although we don't have like a lock file standard yet. But there's pip compile, there's PDM, there's Rye. You need to use a tool and pin your dependency tree, because then you can see when there's updates and you can like update them deliberately and test and adapt to those changes. And I was giving that message a lot in the beginning, and over the past like 5 years or so, I've definitely had to post it less often. I feel like more people are like aware of those tools and practices now.
Well, I would also add that the tooling has gotten a lot better at that. It used to be, okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to write a requirements.txt file, and then you set your versions explicitly. And that, for many people, only addressed the primary dependencies, not the transitive dependency, right? They might pin Flask, but did they depend Vexoid? I don't know. They may have, probably they didn't, unless they use pip freeze, but then you gather a bunch of like new garbage that isn't actually about your project that got sucked in from some other thing that got, it's like, it was really sort of funky before. And I think, I don't know, you mentioned pip tools and pip compile. I am loving that workflow these days.
Yeah, that's what I've switched all the projects themselves to. So if you go look at Flask or Verkzoid or any of those, we have like a requirements folder with different environment files that say like, here are our direct dependencies, and then we compile those into like fully locked dependencies, and all our tests run off of those. Our build and publish workflow runs off of those. So it's not quite the same because like those are our like development dependencies instead of our runtime dependencies, but it's still really helpful just to know that like if we don't do anything, our process will continue to work because it worked last time.
Yeah.
And if we have like contributors at sprints, now like it's much easier. Like I had a problem the first few sprints I was running where every developer would try to set up their own machine and get like different versions of things or have different versions.
Point in time snapshots of just whenever they
Yeah.
got started, right?
So now they like all install the exact same list of dependencies, so everybody's development environment looks exactly the same, which is a lot more usable.
Yeah, that's excellent. I have the same workflow. I have a top level dependencies that I actually would consider my dependencies, and then I pip compile and then unpinned, and I pip compile those to a pinned dependencies, and I just do the upgrade when I feel like, oh, let's go get some new dependencies and see how that goes. Yeah, very nice. Okay, well, let's start with FlashCon.
Okay.
I called it an embedded conference, and this is different than it has been before. I think FlashCon at one point was a purely online one, or maybe that was just COVID, and it was just a matter of timing. I don't remember.
It was timing, really. Years ago, like right before COVID started or quarantine started, I had been like working myself up to do an in-person conference. It's something I've wanted to do for a while because I love attending conferences. I love the community around it. DjangoCon happened in San Diego a few times, and that was really fun because I just crashed it as the Flask person. The San Diego Flask person. So I was like getting ready to do that, and then COVID happened. But some other members of the community, the Palettes team and community, stepped up and said, "Hey, we can do like an online one." Running a conference even online is very hard. There's a lot of stuff to keep track of. And, but we ran 3 online conferences. I think 2020, 2021, and 2023. I think we skipped 22. But those are all on like pyvideo.org if you want to find them. And now FlashCon 2024 is there also. And so I finally got the opportunity with PyCon. They previously had this hatchery program where you could kind of propose, I want to do this event. And the hatchery program will say, like, that sounds great. We'll give you, we will handle the venue, the food, the insurance, the legal, the stuff. You get one of our rooms and you can do whatever you want in it or whatever you propose in it. And so last year at PyCon, I talked to some of the organizers and they suggested, hey, the hatchery is coming back. This would be a great way to do it so that you don't have to learn everything at once, right? You can practice.
Right.
So we managed to do some advertising. It's hard to advertise new conferences in general. And then especially now that like most of the Python, a lot of the Python community is not on Twitter anymore. I'm not. And even if they were, everything is kind of fragmented more. So it was hard to get the reach and get enough like CFP proposals, but we did get a few and ended up accepting 2 people from the community that gave just wonderful talks. And
I saw one on doing PWAs. What was the other one on? The talks.
Was it progressive automotives? No, there's one on
single page. Sorry.
And there was one on observability, and then PWAs or single page apps, and the extension ecosystem, and kind of like the idea around defining Flask plugins. And then there's my talk, which was just the subject of this podcast.
Right. Well, welcome, people. What we've been up to, yeah, that's cool. So, will it maybe be at PyCon next year? Or are you going to branch out?
I don't know yet. I think they would accept me back, but I wouldn't want to like. I kind of view the hatchery. I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I kind of view the hatchery as like we're going to help you get started, but not like keep coming back for the same thing. So I don't want to like.
Right. I'm a 10-year rookie. You're not a rookie anymore. Get out of here with the. Make your place.
I would still love to run a conference somewhat selfishly so that I can run one like in San Diego or on the West Coast at least.
That's what I was going to say. How about San Diego? Then we can all come down there and stay by the beach.
Yeah, I mentioned DjangoCon before, but they stayed in San Diego for 3 years straight at this little hotel that was really nice, had a pool. People just kind of congregated, and it was like 15-minute drive for me. And so yeah, next year at PyCon, I might not be there. We're expecting our daughter to be born in January next year.
Congratulations. And that
yeah,
might take precedence over PyCon.
I'm going to have a lot less time in general, which will come up in other things we're going to talk about. But yeah, I probably, like, for the first time since 2016 or 2015, I will not go to PyCon probably. But there was a conference, right? This was the last conference I went to before quarantine. 2 weeks before quarantine hit, I went up to Los Angeles for PyBeach, which was this very, very small first-time conference. I just love those like little ones. And I met the organizer, Nick Kantar, at North Bay Python a few times now, and I've told him, like, we should try to bring that back. Like, I bet, like, I think there's a few other people who are interested as well. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be FlaskCon specifically, but if I could like run some sort of local conference and I could do some Flask stuff or attract some Flask stuff, you know.
Well, I'm pretty excited that PyCon is going to be in Long Beach year after next.
Yeah, 2 years from now, that'll be really nice as well.
So that'll be really nice. But maybe you can drum up a bunch of interest and connect with a lot of people who are conference goers of that place, but like encourage them to sign up for a list and like get notified about whatever this other thing is, because it'll be in the same basic neighborhood.
Yeah.
So Jazzy out in the audience asks, can we attend FlaskCon online?
This year, or this in-person one in 2024, we weren't able to do that, but all the talks are available now on our YouTube channel. If you just search FlaskCon 2024, you'll find it. Or pyvideo.org has all of them listed. The first three we ran were purely online, so you could watch them streaming. This year, we just didn't have the infrastructure for it, so we couldn't really manage to do a live stream and the recordings at the same time. I was lucky enough to get Elaine Wong's help doing the recordings, and she brought all her cool specialized equipment. So we were able to get the recordings up really fast, at least.
Yeah, that's really good. Are the ones for PyCon even up yet? I don't think they are. Not that I'm aware of.
Maybe they're going like really slowly, but yeah, it was really nice. Like, we just recorded this hard drive, and like she was like, "Oh, you guys timed all your starts and stops really well. So all I have to do is like do these like simple cuts, and it's all up.
Trim the inches and upload. Perfect. Yeah, that's really cool. So yeah, I'll link to the playlist of FlaskCon 2024 for folks in the show notes. They can check that out. Awesome. Well, we'll see what 2025 brings. Hopefully, some more good conference. So
yeah,
let's.
We might have other like team members besides me attending PyCon as well. So we'll see what happens.
Sure. Get someone else to carry the torch.
Space or something. So there's always something going on.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I want to talk about the state of palettes in 2024, but surely there are, quite a few people out there who listen who are really new to Python and programming. You'd be surprised. A lot of people say they use it like this podcast, like language immersion. Like, you want to learn Portuguese, you move to Brazil, you want to learn Python, you just put on your earbuds and listen till it makes sense. So especially for those folks, like, what is Palettes?
Palettes is an open source organization. So we're not a company, but we do have like a team of volunteer open source maintainers, who volunteer their free time to work on Flask and the libraries that make up Flask. That was kind of its purpose when it was created, was, hey, Flask has these set of libraries. Armin, the original author of them, was not as involved in them anymore, and like the community, he wanted the community to be more involved in them. So he created this organization. This was right around when I was becoming maintainer too, 8 years ago. And so it's kind of the organization that holds those projects, and like the team that kind of maintains and sets policies and that sort of thing. So Flask is like the most popular library that everybody will have heard of, followed by Jinja and Click. But then we also have Werkzeug, which is the lower level stuff below Flask, and then Markup Safe and It's Dangerous are two little helper libraries for those things. And then now we've also got Quart, which is the async version of Flask. And that's an official Palettes project now, even though it started as just kind of a separate thing made by
Yeah, that was an outside thing that Philip Jones worked on, and now it's coming closer and closer to being official.
Yeah, and like we're doing a lot of work on that to kind of try to unify Flask and Quart as much as possible. So behind the scenes, they're sharing a lot more code now. Quart, like Werkzeug, is all like the low-level request response handling for that Flask uses, and Quart wasn't using that at first because it needed like much more async things. But we've managed to develop a lot more things called the term is called sans IO, like without input output, where we have all like the behavior that's common to both that doesn't require async IO versus sync processes. Shared between Quart and Flask. And eventually, we're slowly moving in that direction. The idea is that at some point you will not pip install Quart or import Quart anymore. You'll just pip install Flask and then do like from Flask import Quart instead. And so
interesting. Okay.
Library as well, once we get to like a point that we're really comfortable with.
I see you're shipping one thing.
Yeah.
Will you be able to use the same app? You say app-get, or will there be a
yeah? So that's the one
app
thing.
F equals Flask and app Q equals Quart.
Yeah, you'll still have one single app, but you're going to have to pick ahead of time. We've tried to think of ways around this, but just the way that Flask is constructed means that so much of it is customizable by extensions. And that those hook APIs that extensions can customize, all the extensions out there expect that they're sync, they're def, whatever, not async def, whatever, right? And maybe we'll figure out something, but so far we can't figure out a way to unify that into a single object. So you're going to have to still pick, I want to be async first or sync first. And but at least it'll be in one place. Like you're not going to have to decide, oh, I need to know about Quart. You can just look at the Flask docs and see like, oh, I'm going to be doing mostly like web requests or like video processing or something that's like IO intensive. I should pick Quart, or I'm just doing like the basic API that everybody makes for their data science project. I just need Flask. Hopefully it makes it a little easier.
Yeah, really interesting. Question out in the audience: will it sounds like it'll work both WSGI WSGI and ASCII ASGI. Any future
Flask,
where it just goes all async? Not likely in the short term. It sounds like, right?
Yeah, like Flask will always be WSGI because it's so tied to how sync processes work. ASGI has an ability to, and so like if you use like Hypercorn, which is a popular ASGI server, which is also by Phil from Quart, you can run a WSGI application as an ASGI application. You don't necessarily get all the benefits of ASGI, but you can at least run it with that. And kind of like in a similar vein, like if you're using Quart, you can write both sync and async things, and they all just work together.
Yeah.
You just and with Flask, you can write async stuff in Flask right now. You just don't get the benefits of ASGI's connection pooling. So you're still doing one worker per request response, but you can in that worker kick off like async code.
Right. Okay.
More easily.
Interesting. Yeah, I've done stuff where like in Fast API, I've written a decorator that it decorates both sync and async methods, and it's pretty tricky. There's just basically
Jinja
it has two wrappers. It goes, all right, well, which are you? We're gonna actually apply that one to. It's tricky to juggle, and then all the plugins, like it's got to be a gnarly combination.
Yeah, we're like basically we're just like taking it in baby steps, and we're hoping like as we keep unifying their code, like their shared code more and more, we can start like discovering like good patterns for writing an extension that works in both, for example, and documenting those, and maybe helping some extensions that are popular update to that.
Yeah, that'd be
So it's a
interesting.
slow process, but like it's surmountable.
Yeah, maybe you get to a point where they're close enough. You're like, oh, now it's really obvious how these things
Mhm.
unify. In
Yeah.
the beginning, it wasn't, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so what's the state? How are things?
What's the state?
Maybe start with the big boy Flask. And inbox zero is like one of the biggest
Inbox
takeaways I
Zero,
heard.
that was
Yeah,
it was actually that wasn't 2024, that was the 2021 or 22, I think, but,
still look at
I
that.
had
Look at that.
yeah, we don't have, like, true 0 most of the time, although I do get down to it every now and then, but, uh, I did hit Inbox Zero, so when I first started maintaining all these libraries, I think combined, there was probably over 1,000 open issues and PRs. Um, and that's a nightmare if you know all the code, like if you were the author, but I was not the author of this code. Like, so I was both unfamiliar with the internals of all these libraries, uh, and like had to keep track of all these issues. So I was like learning the libraries, learning how to be a maintainer, and trying to keep track
Mm.
of like all these requests going back and forth and like competing PRs and all that sort of stuff. So it was early on, it was a goal I identified of like, I just need to make this manageable. And once I got there, it's become a lot easier. Like once you're at inbox zero, it's a lot easier to keep it hovering
It
around
is.
there. So
I'm really feeling. I'm feeling rough about my true inbox. I'm looking at like 5 or 6 persistent emails. I really got to get back to you, but it's a whole different deal than if it's 10,000. Did you declare any sort of bankruptcy equivalent of like inbox bankrupt, where you just go like archive a good, like if it's 2 years or older, I'm just going to archive it and it'll come back if it matters? Or did you literally go through everyone and deal with it?
um, I did go through everyone individually. I didn't just blanket say everything older than 2 years is closed.
Yeah.
But I did kind of treat things as like I don't like stale bots, so we don't run a stale bot. Like I
Yeah. I
want
don't like those
everybody.
either. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't object to things being closed like as the resolution versus fixed, but I want like somebody to be making that decision.
Right. Right.
And put a reason behind it. So yeah, I tried like going through every single issue. Basically, my workflow is just every single day, pick an issue, work on it. Pick another one. Okay,
Yeah.
it's been a couple hours. Wait until the next day, and yeah, just like had to keep making calls on them.
Yeah, you're like, all right, 2 come in a day. I'm gonna do 20 a day until I catch up or
There
something
was
like that, right?
there was a lot of stuff also where it had just been sitting open for years, and nobody had really commented on it besides like, or maybe they had the most people had commented on was saying like, me too, but they hadn't actually like moved the discussion forward. And
Yeah.
I, you know, it would be nice if open source, if like more people like contribute. I don't blame anybody for not like contributing, or being a contributor, but I would love to like attract more long-term contributors and stuff. But that's like kind of the way it starts, is you need to like help people like make calls on stuff, evaluate things, right? Instead of
Yeah.
just saying me too, start looking into it and saying like, okay, me too, and okay, here's all the like issues that might come up when we do this, or I looked at the code base and we could do it this way.
Right,
People
exactly.
weren't
No,
doing
like,
that,
I
and
also
so like
want it,
I
but
had
I want it, and I think here's a path forward, or here's a
yeah,
prototype or
like they have
something.
to advance the conversation, and that wasn't like happening in a lot of the old issues. So I did kind of like I didn't outright just close old issues, but like I did say like, okay, this thing is old and it hasn't seen any movement. Or like there's a lot of things also where it's like, yeah, it's a reasonable request, but is it necessary for Flask? Does it
Yeah.
belong in Flask or an extension, right? Like
Mm.
this is something I'm trying to figure out. Like I want to be writing like documentation for other maintainers on the team, so they understand like how I did this sort of stuff. And it's really this is like the trickiest problem. I don't know how I'm going to document yet, but like I got a sense over time of just like being able to really quickly make a call of like yes or no on things.
Right.
Like
Good
I
fit,
can
bad
look at
fit. Let's
I can
go.
look at an
Yeah.
issue and say like, okay, no, this doesn't belong in for XYZ or something. Because like Flask had like all the libraries in Palettes have like very focused core like goal of them, and they try to be extensible to some degree. So a lot of the things you can do by making extension. So really, what I try to look for is like, I need this thing in Flask because it is literally not possible to write an extension to do this without being able to like hook into it this way or something like that.
No, that makes sense. Sure. Part of the zen of Flask is that it's minimal, and
Yeah.
then you build around it. You pick your database, you pick your whatever,
Mhm.
and then go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, three open issues is incredible. As in 67,000 stars. That's also pretty incredible. Let's see. So you during each one of these different ones, you kind of gave a sense of like how many downloads. So for Flask, maybe these numbers changed, but I think it hasn't been but a couple months. It's around 75 million downloads a month. That's a hefty chunk of
Yeah.
user base there.
Yeah. I occasionally look at pypistats.org or peppy.tech, are the two like websites that track these numbers. So I can look at the current one for Flask is it loads. Downloads in the last day, 3.15 million.
Wow.
Downloads in the last month, 66 million.
Okay. It's
that
summertime.
fluctuates
People are
to some
chilling. Yeah,
degree.
look at that. Look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like sometimes there's like random, you can see in this graph here, like there's just random times where it just suddenly drops by like a couple 100,000 or rises.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the left half of this graph, it's higher, but like I think that's just because like big services like come in and out of existence or like do an upgrade or whatever. So there are some
Right.
like very big systems out there that are just doing a ton of downloads.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's definitely wild. You'll probably also spot some PyPI outages as well, I imagine, in that graph, which has
well.
got nothing to do
And like they
with
also
you, right?
changed the way they report over time. Like pip and stuff change how they report statistics. So
Okay.
I usually just look at like the overall numbers, which remain pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Try not to look at too often. Like I said at the beginning, like it's a big number to know that like this many people are about to download any change you make.
Yeah, and when I think about these kinds of numbers, it's not just if you make a change to Flask, then it affects this many people, but these are themselves applications using this, each of which has many users potentially. So there's a multiplier on top of this, right?
Yeah. And yeah, that's been difficult. That's one of the other state of Flask. That's the other half of the state of Flask is like we've been making a lot of progress, but like this amount of responsibility rests pretty heavily on me. It's like it can be pretty stressful.
And you did mention a baby and being potentially tired in the future and stuff like that as well,
yeah,
right? So
exactly. But like combined, these numbers combined with the thought that anything I do could break a bunch of people and get them to complain at me, or people will complain at me even if I don't break a ton of people. And just kind of like the ever-present notion of we are not at inbox zero on some of the projects and stuff. So there is still a lot of open stuff. It's
sure.
yeah, it's a lot of stress for me. And it's been I've like suffered burnout a few times from per year for the last 4 years or so.
Oh man, that's rough. Are you getting some support from the other people at the org and potentially from outside?
There are other people on the team, so it's not like we're a bus factor of one in the sense of like if I was not here for some reason, other people would have access to these things and could keep them going. But the reality is, not to downplay all the work that they do in the community and when they and they are working on code, but like I do probably 90% of the code and like the decision making and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So it would definitely be a very different project if I wasn't around.
It would at minimum be a scramble, right? Like when Guido stepped down, like, wait a minute, who's doing what now?
Yeah. So like so this is what I've been like trying to work on for a long time, because I've kind of always recognized that I've been kind of the not limiting factor, but like I'm like the point of failure in this thing. And so I've been trying to grow the team and trying to make our processes more automated, and then now what I'm trying to do is because I know I have this hard deadline in January when I'm going to have less time, is I'm trying to document how to do what I've learned to do, like how to be a maintainer. Because something we don't really have a lot of, it feels like, is we have a contributing guide, right? Or we have user documentation or a developer guide, like how to use Flask, but we don't have a how to maintain Flask documentation. Seems to be kind of missing from the community in general.
Yeah, I presume that'd be out in public. People interested could check it out whenever that gets written
down.
Yeah,
it's not like it's not going to be a private thing, but
yeah, of course,
it's not ready yet, but it's something I'm actively working on. Is like identifying like all the stuff I've accumulated in my head and what I've learned how to do, or decisions I've made, or like services we use. Like just the fact that, we're part of the PSF. This is how you contact the PSF.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Like, it's not written
Who do I call? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or like that we're part of Tidelift and, these other donation sources. And also like stuff like how do I make a decision on whether to keep something closed or opened, or when is it time to make a new release, or what is our version policy or our support policy or our security policy. Like a lot of these things are under documented right now, if they're documented at all. And so that's kind of my goal for the rest of this year, is to like make palettes more sustainable regardless of how much availability I have.
Make it a little more systematized, maybe a little bit. Yeah. So before we move off of PyPI stats, Gooster has an interesting meta question. Is PyPI stats built on Flask itself? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea. I know they're open source.
Oh yeah. Okay. So maybe you could tell that way. I was going to say there's not like a header or something that Flask sends. So, yeah.
I can't find it.
Yeah, we don't know. It is open source. Oh, here we go. Have we got a requirement? We've got a PyProject.toml.
Oh yeah, it's Flask.
There you have it.
How about that?
There we go. Beautiful.
It's very rewarding every time I find out a new place that like just decided to use Flask and has been using it, and it's just completely behind the scenes and you can't tell, like nothing's like, it's all just working.
Yeah.
But I love going to like conferences for that reason too, because so many people come up to me and like say like, oh yeah, we use Flask to like run the Mars rover, or somebody one of the people giving a talk at FlaskCon was like, my company writes the like energy management software for this conference center, and it's in Flask. It's very fun to learn all those new uses.
Have you ever gotten out to the JPL? I know it's like a couple hours drive. That'd be fun, right? To go out there and actually see the Flask code, see it. This is what runs in the rover and the helicopter. Awesome. All right, so that's Flask. What one do you want to talk about next? Next on my tab list, I got Jinja, but we can go wherever you want. So maybe that's a good foundation.
Yeah, we did. Like Flask and Werkzeug are pretty tied, because most of the stuff that people report to Flask is actually an issue with one of the other libraries that Flask is using, and most often that's with Werkzeug. So you can see we're not at inbox 0, we're at inbox 9 right now for this one.
That's incredible. Maybe like I asked you to explain palettes, like Werkzeug, that's probably not how English speaking folks would say that. Workzorg or Workzug
Yeah,
or something,
Workzug.
right?
That's how I
But
pronounce it.
Armin
Sorry.
Ronacher, the creator of this, is German or Austrian, but speaks German, and so that's the German pronunciation, and hence that's why we're saying it that way, right?
That's my best approximation of the. I'm sure I'm doing it wrong, also, but
It's pretty close.
yeah,
It's
it
pretty close.
literally is like it means like work thing, which is like tool.
Yeah. Basically, tool. Yeah, it's like tools, like work
Tool
your
belt or toolkit.
your carpentry tools or handyman tools type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is this was written before Flask existed, and it's I think it was written more when like WSGI was becoming a spec, or had just become a spec, because it is just a bunch of utilities for doing HTTP header parsing, doing all the low-level WSGI environment management, wrapping that information in request and response objects so you can kind of work with them a little easier. So it's all like the underlying tools that you need to build Flask. There's also like the whole routing system, so you can in Flask you just do @app.route, but behind the scenes what that's doing is it's adding it to a route map that Werkzeug defines, and that defines like, here's how we actually like collect that and like turn it into a bunch of rules that we can match URLs against, and there's other things in there as well, the reloader, the debugger, the dev server.
So one of the updates you gave on Werkzeug is a performance improvement by way of getting rid of the stir bytes duopoly.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot in Werkzeug. So that one and the URLlib one that we'll talk about were two big things. But basically, like this library, like I just described it, it's like just a huge collection of tools and little utility functions. And there's a history there, because when all these libraries first started, Python 3 didn't exist or barely existed. And so everything was written originally for Python 2, where strings and bytes worked a lot different.
That was one of the primary break-in changes. There were other changes, but that was the one that people really had a long-lived bug tracking. If it's different syntax, you just change the syntax. But if it's subtle behavior changes, then trouble looms.
Yeah. And so, in Python 2, it was much easier to it was easier to treat like incoming data as bytes, but like treat it as a string. There wasn't like as big a distinction between strings and bytes, which was convenient in some ways, especially for like low-level tools like HTTP, where you just work in ASCII bytes.
I was gonna say, if you like ASCII, it's probably fine. If you don't like ASCII, you might not like it so much.
Yeah, but it also like caused like I first learned Python 3, so I have like kind of a different perspective on this, but I like Python 3's distinction. I think it's much better to have that distinction.
Yeah, you and me both.
Strings and bytes. But at the time, like when it was first happening, it wasn't as clear cut, like, oh yeah, this is better or this is easier, because you had to support both. And so when Python 3 came out and started getting like more momentum, all these libraries tacked on support for both Python 2 and Python 3, which among other things meant that you had to now check for like whether you were getting strings or bytes everywhere. Because you might be in Python 2 land where you're getting bytes, or you might be in Python 3 land where you're getting strings and need to like do other conversions. Werkzeug was especially bad because it's a collection of like kind of independent utility functions. Some functions build on each other, but every function could potentially be imported and used for its own little piece of functionality. And so every single function, you need to check all its arguments for like, am I a string or bytes? Even if most of the time, especially nowadays, people aren't using Werkzeug directly in all these tools. They're using Flask, which just does the right thing from the get-go, which means all those intermediate checks on the way were totally unnecessary. Because you already knew from like the first function that started calling things, that it's
You're testing 10 times for the same thing down the call stack.
Right. And this was just pervasive throughout. Werkzeug was just everywhere with all these unnecessary checks, and it made the code more complex to maintain and reason about, made the like execution slower. There's kind of another thing going on at the same time, which is like we had, because we could support, like because we were working with bytes in a lot of places, there was also like a lot more support for, well, maybe the data is encoded in this encoding or this one. But nowadays, everybody, like I looked at, before I made this decision, I looked at stats. Everybody, 99.5% of people, web applications on the web right now, are using UTF-8. So they're never dealing with other encodings. And UTF-8 can encode everything.
Yeah.
So like Werkzeug was doing all these things about letting you pass encodings all over the place and switch between things, and that was also complexity. So I finally decided, okay, I had heard some anecdotes as well from people who had switched from using Python 2 to Python 3, or had stuck with Python 2 and old versions of Werkzeug because they had noticed a significant performance difference in the first versions of Werkzeug that added that 2 and 3 compatibility. And so I figured, okay, I'm going to get a similar speed up if I remove that now that we don't support Python 2 at all. That was very, very complicated. I basically like just had to go through every single function and start removing it, run all the tests, see what failed, pick another function to keep working on, and just slowly pull it all apart. But I did end up with, so now Werkzeug just supports strings everywhere, except in the very few places where it works directly with the request and response data, where it handles bytes.
Like multi-part form file.
Yeah, when you first get the request in and it's just the raw body that you might turn into JSON or form data, etc., or when you're finally producing the response and taking like either file data, which is binary, or string data and turning it into the bytes. That's the only place now where it deals with bytes. Everywhere else is strings, and the boundary there is always UTF-8. And if UTF-8 isn't your thing, we're not preventing you from using other things. It just means that when you're at those boundaries, you pick the new, you can take the bytes directly and work with them.
Cool.
Surprisingly, I have gotten this was a huge, massive change, and I have not gotten any bug reports about it. Which
wow.
I was stressing so much about like, okay, this is huge. I mean, we tested it first and like made beta releases and everything, but those go almost no attention.
All right, I can't leave the house for the next week. Publish.
Yeah, no, like you joke, but like seriously, when I hit the publish button, or when I used to hit the publish button, I would be like, I want to go for a walk now because I just did a ton of work and I just want to clear my head. But oh god, then an hour from now when I get back, what is my inbox going to look like?
Yeah. What have you done? That's great.
Yeah.
And you talk, another part of your presentation at FlashCon was about project level stuff. Mm-hmm. And you also talked about the systemization type of thing you're looking for. So one of the things you switched to is the trusted publishers. That's kind of cool, right?
Yeah. So I mentioned a little bit about like when we were talking about when we were talking about pinning requirements, I was saying, it makes it a lot easier for every contributor to work on things at sprints if every single environment is the same. And so kind of on a meta level, there's a lot of like different tools and configurations and workflows we use across projects, but they've kind of been developed over time as I've learned them. And so I've been doing work on like a meta level. So every project now, if you go look at Flask and Werkzeug and Jinja, and you clone all the repos look exactly the same. They all have the same files, the same directory layout, same tool configurations, etc. Because just like it should be easy for every contributor to get the same environment, it should be easy for anybody who's used to contributing to Flask to go over to Werkzeug and be just as comfortable in that project.
It's
well.
the Flask
So, yeah,
way, and it all goes the same, right?
So yeah, like trusted publishing, that was another big part of this, was like making workflows. So we have a workflow for running tests, for example. But publishing used to be a very manual process. And it's evolved over the years too, because we were on Travis before, and then we needed to make like Windows builds for Markup Safe, which has wheels. So we were on AppVeyor also. Then Travis went away and stuff, and GitHub Actions became more. And so, but like that was all for tests. Like for building, we basically when we wanted to make a new release, it was way harder in the past, which is why releases happened less often. Because I would have to say like, okay, I'm ready. Do all the little bookkeeping stuff to like set the release version and the release date and everything. Now I have to go get my Mac, get my Windows machine, get my Linux machine, make the builds on all of them, then manually like consolidate them, upload them manually to PyPI, et cetera, and make sure that all worked. So what I have now is I have a standard publish workflow on every single project. It works exactly the same way. And you make a PR so that you can see all the tests run. You make a PR that just does that version bump and the date, says the release date. You watch all the tests pass, and then you push a tag before you merge. You push the release tag, and that kicks off the build workflow. So we run our build. We do SLSA or SALSA attestation to say like these builds are associated with these commits in Git and were built by these workers. It's kind of like a supply chain level thing. And then we it will collect all that stuff, show you here is the release, like here's a draft release for this. Here are all the, you have one more opportunity to look at the files, and then a maintainer can go in and click publish in GitHub's UI. And that will kick off like, okay, maintainer said everything's good. We're just going to upload it now. And that's all automated. We're using the trusted workflow, trusted publishing workflow between PyPI and GitHub. So I no longer have to have my password stored locally for PyPI or have like tokens made for each project. All the authentication happens between GitHub and PyPI automatically and securely. It's pretty cool. If you go look up like trusted publishing on PyPI, has like a blog or documentation that explains it. But it is really, really convenient, and it makes like this whole workflow means that whenever I want to make a new release, I just make a regular PR, push a tag, and then see everything pass and say, yes, we're good. So I just basically have to push 3 buttons now.
Yeah, that's
which
fantastic.
makes it a lot easier to just make more regular releases. Like even bug fix releases, I was always unwilling to make them fast because it was so much work.
Well, if it's a matter of just pushing a commit and then saying, okay, you're way more likely to quickly ship fixes and ship smaller releases and all sorts of stuff. It's really good. And you don't have the whole supply chain problem of your machine somehow got hacked, but then now when you do your build, somebody's injected something gnarly into the wheel, right? Because it never goes through you. It just goes from GitHub directly to PyPI through GitHub Actions, right?
Yeah. And GitHub added their own, so the SLSA attestation that I was talking about. If you scroll down on this screen, you can see that multiple.intoto.jsonl. If you click on it, it's just a big blob of text. But that's basically describing, here are these wheel files, like those wheel files and sdist files. And here's like signatures and about like the GitHub environment that built this and everything. GitHub itself is adding that's a similar sort of attestation. And then PyPI is also adding more attestations. It's not out yet though, but I'm sure I will be testing it once they're starting it, once they release it in beta. So being able to attest that like our build environment was consistent with what the artifacts you're seeing, and like the upload along the way was secured, and like it is gaining more like that's more gaining more attention nowadays in importance.
Yeah, that's
I'm
really
trying to keep up with it all.
it's excellent. It also makes it easier to hand it over to someone else and trust that they're doing it
Mhm.
right, not like
Yeah.
something new. Oh, they only like
Yeah, I
Windows
mean, this
7, so you got a weird wheel or something, you know?
yeah, I mean, this on its own is like was such an impediment to finding other maintainers because you had to teach like I think I probably had some document that explained how to do this build before, like all the steps I went through, but it was like it was so complicated and like yeah, if somebody else wanted to make a release, I would have to make sure they did everything correctly. Um, I had just gotten used to it and it was like rote for me, but it was a lot of steps.
Yeah,
And now it's just anybody does the same, make a PR, push a button. Everything else
perfect.
is done for them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so the 2 takeaways that I got from Verkzoig's update was this dropping of the 2 to 3 juggling made it 50% faster for request response, and
Yeah.
URL lib is no longer URL lib-ish.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the other part. If we're going back to Verkzeug, the so we removed the string bytes testing all over the place, and Verkzeug. This was again historically because of like Python 2 versus Python 3 differences and then compatibility and stuff. But another of the changes in Python 3 was URL lib. Uh, in Python 2, there was like URL lib and URL lib 2, and that's why there's also the project URL lib 3 now.
Yeah.
But Python 3 kind of consolidated that back into URL lib with sub packages instead. So it kind of changed the interfaces and where everything was. So at the time, it made sense for Verkzeug to just copy that code into our own code base and then make our own tweaks to it to be compatible with everything. And but what that ended up meaning was we had an entire copy of URL lib with our own tweaks in our code base, and then we weren't keeping up with changes. So like CPython has like 100 different core devs on it. I mean, they're not all paying attention to URL lib, but they're making regular, security updates or just performance improvements and that sort of stuff. And we're not getting any of those benefits because we now have like this vendored copy that we've changed ourselves. We couldn't even bring in the changes. And just like the string bytes everywhere, it having that our own copy of that really complex low level code made it harder to reason about the code and be like maintain it. And all this stuff is kind of like it's not the essential parts of Verkzeug. Verkzeug is like trying to be the WSGI utilities and stuff. It's not trying to be like every single possible, like it's not trying to, we don't need to make our own URL lib utility and everything to be Verkzeug.
Yeah.
So that was another big one where I identified like, okay, this is just a lot of complexity. I didn't actually expect this to be a performance improvement, but when I actually went through and removed URL lib and our own copy and replaced it with Python's version, we got like a 30% speed up just on our own. So the combined of those two big changes was like about a 50% speed up in our request response.
Yeah, that's
handling.
awesome.
But just like it turns out that the Python's implementation of all this was just faster than ours. And it still, does all the same things.
Yeah, and
So that
now
was
you don't
big.
have to mess with it. You get it for free,
Yeah, exactly.
like everyone else.
We can
Yeah.
we're like a lot of these changes, a lot of the changes in all the libraries are stuff where I've been, like I said, I wasn't the original author of this stuff, so I've had to like learn the code bases. I've had to like dig into them and say like, what is written here? Why is it written this way? How is it all related? And along the way, I just keep identifying like, okay, this is the actual, purpose of this library. Does this fit into that purpose, or can we be doing something different? And so kind of trying to like slim down the libraries and like tighten up the focus on their like purposes more.
Right. If there's parts that are it needs to work, but it's not its purpose, maybe that can come from somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Makes
we
it
got
more
about 10. Yeah, absolutely. We got about 10 more minutes tops,
Okay.
probably. So, what else do we want to cover to give us
So
the
yeah,
state?
I'll mention Jinja and Click really briefly because these two libraries are also huge. They're used everywhere. Download a ton. Jinja is a templating library. Like you write template files and then you can render them with variables to produce output HTML, but also like text files or all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I think people pigeonhole
install
Jinja.
music for-
Yeah, I think people pigeonhole Jinja too much. They think, okay, well, I'm generating dynamic HTML from a server request. Like, you can use Jinja to generate all sorts of files. I use it on stuff basically on TalkPython to generate like emails. Somebody wants to reset their password, right? Like, I'll generate an email body from it, for example, right? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then Click is just like Flask is a framework for web applications, Click is a framework for command line applications. And both of these libraries have gotten a lot of attention from me, but they are not inbox zero. Unlike the other libraries, I have not managed to get them down there because I was working on all the other libraries. And so these are where I'm like going to need to focus. Like I said, my current focus for the rest of this year is writing maintainer documentation. So I'm trying to do less code. And all of these libraries are stable. Everybody downloads them. Like a ton of people download them. They all work. We can make them better and everything, but they're not in like, it's not like they're in immediate danger or need of anything. But I do want to like clear out the backlogs of those as well. And, looking for more contributors for that to help with that.
Yeah, you said you're looking for contributors who are really psyched about typing, and also for some of these projects.
If anybody knows, like, is an expert in typing and like type annotations and static type tools, all the libraries do pass MyPy strict tests and export. There, like, we do some testing against Pyrite to some degree, but I'm just typing. It's very hard for me to understand. Like, it's a very complicated subject on its own versus all the other stuff I have to be doing. So I really would like somebody who's like, I am an expert at typing. I'm gonna like start fixing up what you're, because I had to learn typing as I was like adding it to these libraries.
Yeah,
that's a big thing that we can improve.
Okay.
And yeah, there's like we've gotten a lot of a lot of the stuff in Click and Jinja also. We have PRs for a lot of stuff. It's just a matter of me having the time to go through and review all of them to cut down that backlog. But we're getting there. I'll get there eventually.
Yeah, beautiful.
And then the last thing I want to mention before we run out of time completely is besides Palettes, the core projects itself, I've kind of mentioned this theme of trying to make the projects more maintainable and grow the community and the team. And part of that I've started identifying is the greater ecosystem around these projects. So Flask is great to use on its own, but it's made even better by all the extensions out there that people have written, for doing email, doing database stuff, authentication, all sorts of things. And just like Flask itself, and all those libraries, there was a long period where they weren't getting as maintained, as much attention and stuff. And then I started stepping in. A lot of those extensions were written quite a long time ago now, and the maintainers of those have kind of moved on to different things. And so there's a lot of stuff in the ecosystem that isn't getting as much attention as it needs. And a lot of the times, the maintainers are aware of this and they're willing to to take help, to get help with those things. And so I was really inspired by a project for Django extensions called JazzBand. Where basically they're an organization that says, are you a popular Django extension or pip tools? For some reason, they also control pip tools, but do you not have time to be the maintainer of it anymore? Come over to JazzBand, you'll still be like, you can still be involved in the project, but we'll also help you find more people from the community. Like, we will open up the maintaining process to your interested, users in the community. And so I'm doing a similar thing with Palettes called Palettes Eco, or ecosystem.
Okay.
So if you go to github.com/palletseco, pallets
With an S.
eco. Yeah, pallets-eco, GitHub. What we've started to do is reach out to maintainers of Flask SQL Alchemy, Flask Admin, Flask Security, Flask Mail, Blinker, caching, debug toolbar, like all these huge extensions. So many of them have these huge backlogs, just like Flask and all the other projects did when I got started with them. And their maintainers are overwhelmed. And so I've been reaching out to them and kind of explaining, hey, we're starting this thing up. Do you want to add your project? So we've had some success already. We've had people at sprints contribute to them. And like I was talking about, I've kind of standardized how Flask and the other projects look, like all the tools they're using, the layouts they're using, the workflows they're using. I'm taking that same approach and trying to standardize all the extensions we get too. So the idea is that anybody who's used to contributing to one of these extensions should be just as familiar to them to jump into another extension and contribute there as well, right?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And so with Palettes Eco, we can help find maintainers from the community, add them, but the core team for Palettes themselves still has access as well. So, if we make some change to Flask that finally removes something some internal thing that somebody was relying on, and like suddenly this popular live extension no longer works, we at least have access. Like, we're probably not going to take on the responsibility of being the core maintainers of all these things, but we can step in and make an emergency release that just, oh, you just needed to change this line here, make a bug fix release really quick. So we can at least keep the ecosystem going while we work on finding longer term sustainability with more maintainers.
I love that idea, because a lot of times it is a really small change, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right?
Right, exactly. Like, a lot of the times it's been we have made little deprecations and then removals and stuff, which have that was the one thing that some random extension was relying on that half the ecosystem ended up relying on. And we just had to change a line or change an import or add an argument.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my big focus now. If people are interested in contributing to Palettes, they're welcome to contribute to Jinja and Click or any of the projects as well. If there's open issues, they can work on them. But a huge new source of involvement for people can be, what are the extensions you're using? Let's get you involved in those as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because to make a change to Flask that's a highly polished piece of software, but the extensions potentially are more open to just jumping in and getting into it.
Yeah, it's really hard for people. It's hard to tell people this, but people come in excited, oh, I want to contribute to Flask, and then they look at it and they're like, oh, 3 open issues, what do I do? Or and these 3 issues are really low level stuff, or they've already been handled or something.
Sure.
And so we what we're telling people now is okay, well, Flask, not only is it made up of these 5 other libraries, but there's also this whole extension ecosystem out there for you to contribute to. Everybody's heard of Flask, so we can point them at the right place. They come to us and then we point them to the community.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I'll be sure to link to that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we're out of time. Thank you for being here. Just final call to action. People either want to contribute or just want to use Flask. What do you tell them?
Yeah. So like I said, we're developing Palettes Eco. I'm currently writing maintainer documentation, so it'll make it easier for people to get involved in that way. I'm writing a new website with a lot of our policies and everything. But the main point of contact for all of this and the way we coordinate with our community is on our Discord server. So if you go to discord.gg/palettes, that will let you join the Palettes server. It's open to everybody. we need help, not only contributing to the libraries, but answering questions in our questions channel, or like triaging issues and all sorts of things. There's lots of different ways to be involved in the projects without writing code, and it all starts on that Discord server.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here, and catch you next time.
Yeah, thank you.